know, the PSA. Back in the day, they used to do what are called digital rectal exams, where they would actually put, and they may still do this, I hope not, but they may, where they put their fingers into your butt to feel your prostate. And then they realized, why the hell are we doing this? No one knows what the hell they're feeling for, unless you're like a super experienced like urologist. Like, what am I gonna feel in there that lets me know, like, dude, you should probably get that looked at? So
welcome to Hormones Happen, the no-fluff podcast for men and women who are tired of feeling stuck in someone else's body. If you've been dragging through your day, struggling with stubborn weight, low sex drive, brain fog, or just feeling off, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. I'm a nurse practitioner who's helped countless people transform their lives through hormone replacement therapy, and I've been through the journey myself. Here, we cut through the confusion, ditch the shame, and talk real solutions. Because it's time to stop just surviving and start thriving. This is your moment to be the hero of your own story.
welcome back, guys, to another episode of Hormones Happen. Thank you for joining me. I've got a real treat for you guys today. I'm actually going to put you in the driver's seat of a patient's perspective. And what that means, as confusing as that may have sounded, is I'm actually going to run you through an initial consult, right? Free of charge, guys, free of charge. And while this is my process, it's very similar in other clinics as well. So if you kind of been on the fence as to whether or not you wanted to go through the rigmarole of actually starting HRT, specifically TRT, this one's for men, women, yours is coming, then this is going to be a great episode for you, because I'm going to tell you what kind of people come to my clinic, right? What kind of symptoms might you be experiencing that I think would benefit highly from hormone replacement therapy, specifically TRT. What labs do we get? Why do we get them? And why don't I get other labs? Now, this will be a part one of a 2-series podcast. And the next one, we'll talk about the treatment options, because there's a lot, guys. And I want to keep these within a reasonable time frame because I respect your time. But without any further ado, guys, let's get into this. All right, guys. So tell me if this scenario sounds familiar to you. You're having decreased energy during the day, just dragging ass, having a hard time sleeping at night. Libido's trash. You're having a real hard time with the spouse because of it. You got some children that want to play with you. They love you, and you just really have a hard time giving yourself enough of yourself to them after work. Does this sound familiar? Because this is very, very common. Depression, huge. Low self-esteem. Okay, but let's say this. Let's say you go to your primary care provider and you tell them all this. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to walk out of the office with a handful of antidepressants and some sedatives for sleep, guys. Okay, not always, but mostly. It's unfortunate, but this is the truth. I have guys come to me all the time. They have a laundry bag of medications that they don't need, they never wanted, and they still have worsening symptoms. So what do we do about it, right? What's the step? Because at this point, you've got to be feeling kind of defeated. What do we do for these guys? Is it just too bad? This is just part of aging. You're going to feel like crap the rest of your life? Or is there something that we can actually do to improve your quality of life? Absolutely, guys. We can help you. There are clinics that can help you. Now, what is one thing that has changed between being 20 years old, you're thriving, you're doing great, and now your hormones have decreased? It's a guarantee, guys. There are a few guarantees in life, but that is one of them. Okay. So you finally say, hey, you know what? I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to go ahead and reach out to a clinic. Let's say you call the clinic, right? We talk to you about your signs and your symptoms and what you've already done. First step, guys, blood work. We're going to get some blood work, okay? Now, this is huge. This is a paramount step because it gives us a baseline. It gives us an idea of what's going on inside of you metabolically. Now, let's say, do I care about the testosterone? Is the testosterone going to be whether or not you get treatment? Absolutely not, guys. But it gives me a piece of the puzzle, right? Your symptoms are not normal. Now, just because your testosterone level may be quote unquote normal, it doesn't mean everything's okay because you're not a number. And when you come into the office with those symptoms, let's say the testosterone is, let's say 500, right? Which is in a normal range. And we say your testosterone's normal. Do you feel better? Because no one ever does. Okay. So first step is lab work. Okay. Let's say we went ahead and ordered the lab work. You go and get the lab work. Well, now what? Well, we need to talk about it. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to the lab work. Now, what do I specifically order? The specific things that I order on my patients are a CMP, and we'll talk about these, CBC, lipid panel, TSH, LH, FSH, a total and free testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, estradiol, and a PSA.
Testosterone isn't just a guy thing. Women need it too. The problem? No one's been paying attention until now. At Steel City HRT and Weight Loss, we prioritize you with personalized treatments designed to restore balance and help you feel your best. If you're ready to start taking back control, call or text 719-669-4223 now.
Now, let's say you come into the office, you have your blood work, and you're sitting in front of me, and we're going to actually talk about it now. So we start at the complete metabolic panel. The things that I really hone in on with the complete metabolic panel are your kidneys, electrolytes, and your liver. Okay. And when we look at your kidneys, we're looking at 3 specific labs: BUN, creatinine, and GFR. These are the labs that let me know how well your kidneys are filtering waste products, specifically the GFR. Now, some things that I'll often see with this is, the creatinine may be a little elevated. If you have some dehydration, sometimes in men with more musculature, you will see that GFR be a little more decreased falsely. So there is a more accurate level called a cystatin C that actually takes that into account. And what I'll often see with men who are very active eating high protein diets, you'll see an increase in that BUN. Now, these can or cannot be normal variants. It just depends. Remember, this is all for trending purposes. And it varies. It varies wildly. And so we move on down, right? We've already looked at our kidneys. We're going to look at some electrolytes: sodium, potassium, chloride, all the things you find in a Gatorade, right? But these do a lot more. They regulate our muscle and our heart activity. And, whether or not they're a little deficient can depend on some of the medications you're on. I have some guys that come to me on blood pressure medications that have UP a lot. We call them diuretics. And when you're on these medications, yeah, it'll cause, your potassium to decrease. If you're on a specific supplement, I got a lot of people that come to me on these herbal supplements, natural test boosters and whatnot. And yeah, that can cause some fluctuations as well. But, it's very rare that I see significant issues with the electrolytes, and the kidneys are completely fine. Now we're going to move on down to our liver. Now, when we look at the liver, I really break it down to 2 different categories, okay? And this may be a little confusing for some of my healthcare folks just because of some of the terminology that we often use in the field. But when I look at the function of liver, I look at proteins, okay? I look at total protein, bilirubin, globulin. These are proteins all made by the liver. And when they're too low or too high, there's something going on with the liver and its ability to produce them. When I look at inflammation of the liver, which can be caused by a variety of things, such as Tylenol, alcohol, viral infections like hepatitis, the most common cause in the United States is fatty liver disease, where fat builds up around the liver and just irritates the hell out of it. And we'll see these, well, I know they're called LFTs, liver function tests, but they're inflammatory markers, guys. They don't tell us the function of the liver. We will see these increase, okay? And like I said, I commonly see this with fatty liver disease. Rarely do I see someone who's taking so much Tylenol that it's affecting their liver. Same thing with the alcohol. And so once we look at the kidneys, electrolytes, liver, now let's move on down to our lipid panel. So this is kind of my soapbox with cholesterol. We overcriminalize it because cholesterol is necessary for the production of all of our hormones. It sits right up here at the top of the throne of all of our hormone production in a process called steroidogenesis. And cholesterol moves hormones through the body because they're hydrophobic. They can't just move freely through the blood. They need carrier molecules, transporter molecules, which are in the forms of proteins and fats. So cholesterol serves a very important purpose. One of the things I often see is we look at the cholesterol and we see that it's high, and we just, automatically say, here's a medication, typically a statin, like Lipitor or Crestor. And they do phenomenal at decreasing cholesterol. They absolutely do. But what we're not realizing is they're also decreasing our testosterone. How many guys have you seen on Lipitor or Crestor who complain of erectile dysfunction? Now, it could be multifaceted, because, and I'll just do a little side tangent, erectile dysfunction can be a little bit more red herring, guys. If the issue with your ability to get erections is there's plaque buildup on the vasculature of the penile arteries, then you better believe you've got plaque buildup somewhere else, okay? So can be a little bit of a red herring, so it's a little tricky, but also let's not neglect the fact that when we're decreasing our testosterone, we're also decreasing our nitric oxide production. We're also decreasing our estradiol, which helps with stronger erections. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
Guys, if you like content like this, please like, follow, and share the Still City HRT and Weight Loss Facebook and Instagram page. Now back to the podcast.
So as far as cholesterol goes, what are my thoughts on it? Well, it depends on your lifestyle because it's just a number. So if I see an elevated cholesterol, am I going to get really worried and say, as soon as this appointment's over, you're going to die? Absolutely not. If you're the guy that says, hey man, I'm going to the gym 5 days a week, I'm eating, as healthy as I can, I'm staying hydrated, and you look good, right? You're not coming into the office 300-400 pounds overweight, oxygen on, huffing and puffing. I mean, I'm not worried. I've had young guys come into my office with LDL cholesterols north of 200, right? We get them on TRT, corrects, right? But that's also with the exercise and changes in the diet. But remember, more testosterone we have, it has to get transported. So it uses that LDL cholesterol. So we look at the cholesterol, the lipid panel. It's very rare that I see a normal one of these. Now we're going to move on down and we're going to look at what's called a CBC, or complete blood panel. Now with our CBC, we're looking at different blood cell types in the body. We look at white blood cells, red blood cells, and we look at platelets. And so white blood cells are like the defenders of our body. They fight off infection. They are the first line of defense. And we look at this measurement as kind of a crude way to determine our immune health. The next blood cell type we look at are red blood cells. Now, these guys carry oxygen throughout the body. And we have all these little indices underneath it, like hemoglobin, hematocrit, MCH, NCV. And they basically tell us how many do we have, what's the size, what's the color, what's the shape. They just describe it to us. And then we have platelets, which are specialized blood cells that clump together to prevent us from bleeding. So if you cut your arm and you get a scab, those are platelets saving your life. Now, one thing that's important to know is how testosterone influences our CBC. Now, testosterone is what we call an erythropoietic androgen. It's just a fancy way of saying it's going to increase the number of red blood cells. And it does this through a couple different mechanisms. One, it increases the number of red blood cells that are released from the bone marrow. But two, it decreases what's called hepcidin. Hepcidin is an iron-regulating peptide. And the less hepcidin we have, the more bioavailable iron we have in the blood, which is necessary for the creation of new red blood cells. So if you're on exogenous, meaning outside source of testosterone, you are going to have increased number of red blood cells, which we call erythrocytosis. Now, this begs the question, are we now at risk of blood clots? Are we at risk of heart attacks? Are we at risk of strokes? And the answer is unequivocally no. When there's an increased number of red blood cells, we call this erythrocytosis. I oftentimes hear people call this polycythemia, which is another term for multiple numbers of multiple cells. But it's really polycythemia vera, which is a myeloproliferative bone marrow cancer. And this bone marrow cancer isn't just a quantitative issue, it's a qualitative issue, meaning that these red blood cells are prothrombotic. They have platelet-like activity. They want to clot. They're not normal red blood cells. And if you have polycythemia vera, you do have a significant increased risk of blood clots. Now, with a secondary erythrocytosis, such as that from testosterone, you do not. So let's break this down into some simple terms and some simple ideologies. If high levels of testosterone causes heart attacks and strokes from blood clots, then why aren't 20-year-olds having heart attacks and strokes? That's when our testosterone's naturally highest. Okay, but no. It's the complete number, the increased number of red blood cells, right? Well, what about athletes that do blood doping? They give themselves blood because remember, red blood cells carry oxygen throughout the body. It's a competitive advantage. They're not having heart attacks and strokes, right? And so they've done studies on Sherpas, which are guides that take people up Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. And they've seen that these guys have incredibly, I don't want to call it thick blood, but high hematocrits, which is the level, the value that we use to determine how many red blood cells you have in your body. So for instance, let's say your hematocrit is 55. When you got your blood drawn, they spun it down, 55% of it were red blood cells. Now, these Sherpas, they were like as high as like 60, maybe even 70 in some of them, I believe. They're completely healthy guys. So what we have to realize is there are risk factors outside of testosterone that can increase blood clot risks, but testosterone and the erythrocytosis does not. Now, is there a specific number that we get to that we say, no, we need to stop the medication, we need to decrease the medication, or you need to go give blood? We call it therapeutic phlebotomy. There isn't. I do know a lot of clinics will do a cutoff of 56%, but the reality is I'm not a huge advocate for frequent therapeutic phlebotomy or blood donations for a couple reasons. One, I'm just going to do a fantastic job of lowering the number. But one, other than losing blood, you're going to be losing iron. Two, you're going to be losing microcellular nutrients. And three, you're going to be losing growth factors. So I have seen this before where someone has come into my clinic giving multiple blood donations, maybe one every couple weeks to try to manage their erythrocytosis. And they have now developed an iron deficiency with erythrocytosis. So if you remember, iron creates new red blood cells. We call it erythropoiesis. How do we replace the iron while not increasing that red blood cell? That's the million-dollar question. And so it's a tricky situation that we put ourselves into. So I recommend avoiding it. But what can we do to help mitigate it? Because there are things we can do to mitigate erythrocytosis. Number one is hydration. That's huge. Number two, injection frequency. That's huge. Stable levels, guys. Three, very convincing studies showing that grapefruit can actually normalize hematocrit levels. So there are things that we can do to help mitigate that risk of erythrocytosis or the elevation of erythrocytosis.
If you're serious about optimizing your health, don't stop here. Visit stillcity-trt.com for in-depth information on all things HRT and TRT. Now let's get back to the show.
And the last thing on our CBC is the white blood cell count. So I see about 30% of my patients have an increased number of white blood cells 6 weeks after starting TRT that normalizes by 3 months. And the reason for this is that testosterone can influence hematopoietic stem cells to go down what's called this myeloid pathway. And at this point, they become either white blood cells or red blood cells, mostly red, but sometimes white blood cells. And when they become white blood cells, we see an increase. But this is the thing, it should come down. If you're on TRT and your white blood cell count is elevated and it's not decreasing or keeps increasing, it's not TRT, guys. There's something else going on. You need to get that checked out, okay? But I'd say that about 30% of guys, I do see that white blood cell count increase. So now let's move on down and let's talk some hormones, guys. Let's talk shop here. So the first hormone that we look at is TSH. It's a thyroid hormone. And we look at it because it tells us the connection of the anterior pituitary gland, where TSH is created, and the thyroid. So what happens is the anterior pituitary gland sends TSH down to your thyroid, and your thyroid releases hormones T3 and T4. What happens is sometimes your thyroid will get lazy. We call this hypothyroidism. And your anterior pituitary gland sends that signal down to your thyroid and says, guys, time to make some hormones. And your thyroid's like, nah, we're not going to do nothing. And so what happens is that TSH will build up in the blood. And the worst part is your thyroid won't make hormones. And so you're going to feel like crap. And so the reason we check it is because depending on the severity of your hypothyroidism, you may or may not benefit from the TRT. Okay. And what I mean by that is with low levels of hypothyroidism, typically less than 10, the TRT is going to improve it. It's going to sensitize thyroid receptors, and it's going to increase the conversion of T4, which is an inactive version of thyroid hormone, to T3, which is an active version of thyroid hormone. Now, if it's a significant hypothyroidism, maybe above 10, maybe some cases higher, then I could throw testosterone at you all day and you're going to feel like shit because there's a secondary issue, right? We need to address that secondary issue. The next hormone we're going to look at is called LH and FSH, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Now, these are stimulatory hormones also made by the anterior pituitary gland. But instead of going to the thyroid, they go down to the testes, boys, and they make testosterone for us. Now, I check this because I want to see what the natural connection of your brain to testes is. Because when we talk about low testosterone, we have two main categories, primary and secondary. Now, primary is going to be an issue at the level of the testes. So the anterior pituitary gland sends LH and FSH down to the testes and says, guys, it's time to make some testosterone. Let's go. And the testes are just like, they're either confused or they're just saying, nah. And what happens is we don't get the testosterone, and we'll see the LH and the FSH build up in the blood, just like we did with the TSH and hypothyroidism. Now, some causes of this could be chronic infections of the testicles, trauma, surgical removal. We call it an orchiectomy, and just age-related changes, guys. Because believe it or not, those testes are organic tissue. And over time, they become less efficient at signaling these hormones. Now, secondary hypogonadism, on the other hand, is where the testes are fine. The testes are ready. The problem is either the anterior pituitary gland or even higher up in the brain in a part called the hypothalamus. And I see this with people who've had traumatic brain injuries, multiple concussions. I've got several MMA fighters. You could potentially have a pituitary adenoma. And so what we'll see is we'll see LH and FSH significantly depressed. And once again, the result is still low testosterone, okay? But in most cases, I don't see a discernible cause, whether it be primary or secondary. Sometimes the testosterone is just going to be low. Look at the environment that we're in, guys. BPAs in plastics, fluorides in water, preservatives in the food. I mean, the reality is we're being poisoned. And what is the solution to that? Well, they're going to lower the reference range and say that's fine. Having a lower testosterone is completely fine. In reality, guys, it's not fine. Okay. And so after we look at LH and FSH, I have an idea. Are you naturally producing your own testosterone? Then we move on down to testosterone, right? This is the exciting part, guys. So I always check both a total and a free testosterone. Now, what's the difference and which one's better? Well, a total testosterone looks at all the testosterone in your body, even the testosterone that you can't use. Now, what the hell do I mean by that? When testosterone's bound to proteins like albumin or sex hormone binding globulin, then they can't activate the androgen receptor. And if you remember, testosterone's hydrophobic. It has to be carried with either fats or proteins. So when they're being carried by these proteins, which I do want to say they can unbind from, we can't use them. So it's not a great measurement to see the correlation to your symptoms. So a free testosterone, on the other hand, takes us into account. And it tells us what amount of testosterone do we have to use. And that is a much better indicator of why do you feel so shitty with this testosterone level?
Let's get real for a second. Yeah, aging happens, but feeling exhausted, struggling with sleep, losing your edge in the bedroom, and watching your confidence tank, that's not just getting older. That's a hormonal imbalance. And you don't have to live with it. They'll tell you hormones are dangerous, but hand you a prescription with a mile-long list of effects. Enough is enough, guys. At Steel City HRT and Weight Loss, we cut through the noise. We offer safe, bioidentical hormone therapy customized to you and backed by real lab monitoring and personalized care. Because your health isn't one size fits all. If you're done with the BS and ready to feel like yourself again, strong, focused, and confident, call or text us at 719-669-4223. Let's build a plan that actually works for you. Steel City HRT and Weight Loss. Be the hero of your own story.
Right? And I'm not saying that there's ever going to be a number that excludes you from benefits of treatment, but it gives us a better picture. And to kind of round it out, I always get a sex hormone binding log. This gives us an idea of, well, how much SHBG, as we call it, are you making, right? It's made by the liver. It's a protein made by the liver. And high amounts are actually correlate with good metabolic health. But, it gives us an idea. If you have a really high SHBG, you're going to have a lower free testosterone comparatively to your total testosterone. So for instance, when I started TRT about a year ago, my total testosterone was about 500. My free was around 100. And my sex hormone binding globulin was probably around 30 or 40. I've had guys who come in with a total testosterone of around 300. They have not suppressed, but lower SHBG, maybe like 20, and then they have a free testosterone of like 100, same as me. So they're making better use of it. Okay. But everyone's different, guys. There's a lot of genetic components to this that we can't control. Okay. And then the last thing we look at, guys, PSA. I know the PSA. Back in the day, they used to do what are called digital rectal exams, where they would actually put, and they may still do this. God, I hope not, but they may, where they put their fingers into your butt to feel your prostate. And then they realized, why the hell are we doing this? No one knows what the hell they're feeling for, unless you're like a super experienced, like urologist. Like, what am I going to feel in there that lets me know, like, dude, you should probably get that looked at. So we do a PSA. It's a blood test. And it's prostate-specific antigen. It's a protein. It's a protein released by the prostate. And we use it as prostate cancer screening, okay? And so the cutoff, essentially, for this is 4. Now, it's not the best test in the world because there's a lot of things that can falsely elevate it, such as masturbation. You lose 99% of the PSA and ejaculate. And so if you masturbate before you get your blood drawn, we can get a false elevation. Bike riders, just because where that seat sits, it rubs the prostate, it gives it a massage, and it can falsely elevate it. And then, of course, when they were doing digital rectal exams and then getting a PSA, falsely elevated. So they stopped doing that. And so this is really important for trending. It's really good for trending. Just a one-off measurement doesn't really help us a lot. Because even if you were to get a PSA and it was elevated, it doesn't mean, and this is important, the PSA cannot diagnose prostate cancer. It cannot diagnose prostate cancer. But a single elevated measurement is just that. It's just a single elevated measurement. We need to recheck it and see, is it still elevated? Is it going down? Is it going up? Right? And so I've seen it sometimes where these PSAs will elevate and then they will come back down. Regardless, we always check it, but it's also important that I tell you, testosterone does not cause prostate cancer. Now, how can I make such a bold statement? Well, it all stems back into the 1940s when they had men who had prostatic lesions and they gave them androgen deprivation therapy, which are basically medications to decrease your testosterone. When they decreased the testosterone, they saw that these lesions regressed. So I guess it makes sense, right? Like if no testosterone is improving the lesions, giving testosterone is going to cause them. Fair. Okay. We've had a lot of research since then, though, guys, and we've developed what's called the prostate saturation hypothesis. What that means is that your prostate is covered in DHT receptors. And so when you have testosterone, it gets either stays as testosterone, gets aromatized into estradiol, or it gets converted via 5-alpha reductase into DHT or dihydrotestosterone. Now, DHT is responsible for the health and growth of our prostate. And our prostate is, of course, covered in them. Now, you can only saturate those receptors to a certain point before any further stimulation does nothing. And they've actually seen in studies, now granted it's not completely 100% in stone, but levels as low as 250 total testosterone, your prostate is most likely already fully saturated. It's essentially like having a sponge be fully wet and then dunking it into a bucket of water. That sponge is not going to get any wetter, guys. And that's the same thing with your prostate and the DHT receptors. So it's really important to know that testosterone does not cause, or TRT does not cause prostate cancer, but you can get prostate cancer while on TRT. There are actually a lot of urologists who keep men on TRT even if they're diagnosed with prostate cancer. Because what's the difference between someone who has a natural level of, let's say, 700 and they have prostate cancer versus someone with an exogenous level of 700 and they have prostate cancer? There isn't any. And they've actually shown that men that develop prostate cancer with low testosterone have a higher chance of getting high grade prostate cancers. And so there's a lot to it, guys, and we're going to continue learning more. But that's a summary of the labs that we would discuss face to face before moving on to what are our treatment options. But I've taken up enough of your time and I appreciate you guys. So be sure to tune into the second part of this so we can discuss treatment options.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Hormones Happen. I hope you're walking away with some clarity and confidence. If this resonated with you, let's keep the conversation going. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or over on the blog. And if you haven't yet subscribed yet, go ahead. It's the easiest way to keep growing and learning. As always, we believe in your power to heal, thrive, and lead. Be the hero of your own story.